Okay, so tonight's practical Tanya class is going to be it's going to bring a lot of the past 16 chapters together because it sort of ends a whole long run of the first idea of the Tanya, which we built up to. If you remember, in chapters 1 through 8, in chapters 1 through 8, we gave a lot of concepts. Then, actually, I'm going to pull it up on the screen. So, it's actually, and then, okay. So, here we go for a little bit of a quick review because chapter 17 is really going to bring a lot of things together. So it's a lot of info. I'm going to try to get through it with you pretty quickly so we can move on to the main topic of tonight. So chapter 17 is going to finish the first run of Tanya's Beinoni idea. Chapter review, it's really beautiful if you remember the chapters. I know, many of you may have forgot a chapter here or there, can't expect to remember all 16. So here's what we have, here's what you need to know to really appreciate the beauty of chapter 17. Chapters 1 through 2 introduced us to the paradigm of animal soul versus godly soul. That it's not just good versus bad, rather, it's animal soul that is selfish, self-perpetuating drive. You need it to live, but it's also selfish, versus the godly soul, which is that drive that realizes that we are nothing other than just a spark, and God is the sort of source of all those sparks, all reality sparks, and it longs to be at home in its source, in that godly source. So look at the godly soul is always flickering upward. And the animal soul is always wanting to contain and protect what it has. Chapter 3, the godly soul is made up of, we talk about the makeup of the souls. It starts with the godly soul, and then you can just sort of do mirror image for the animal soul. But in chapter 3, it says the godly soul is made up of two things: intellect, awareness of God, and emotions, love and awe for Hashem, of God. Also known as insides. You're made up of your insides, the limbs, all the internal makeup, the organs. So that's what the soul is, and its inner level. Chapter 4 it tells us how there's 3 garments of the godly soul, and that is 3 expressions: willful thought, speech, and action. Those are all expressions. Another way, also known as outsides, the outsides of the soul, how the soul presents, how it expresses. So you have insides of the soul, you have outsides of the soul. I skipped a bunch of chapters because it basically tells you how, okay, there's insides, intellect, consciousness and emotions of the godly soul. There's garments of the godly soul: thought, willful thought, conscious thought, speech and action. And in 6, it says the same thing exists by the animal soul. It's made up of selfish, animal, like self-perpetuating intellect and emotions. And it tells us in chapter 9 that those 2 souls that's the battle. The battle is for the body. Who's going to get to express on the outside in thought, speech, and action? Will it be the godly soul's thought, speech, and action in the body, or will it be the animal soul's thought, speech, and action in the body? And each one is vying for it. We also said, just as a small detail in there, that each one has a certain advantage or vantage point. The animal soul is primarily felt in the emotions. It has intellect, but it's sort of only there to feed the emotions or to rationalize your emotions. Emotions are much more subjective and able to facilitate the animal soul's drive of self-perpetuation. The godly soul's special vantage point is the brain, the intellect, where it is it's special because intellect, even just your mundane thinking, ability to think, is at least more objective towards ideas other than what you want and how you see it. You can think of an idea or another perspective that you might disagree with, but you can actually think it over. So the advantage of the godly soul is in the brain, the mind. You'll see why that's relevant soon. And in chapters 10 through 11, we talked about the tzaddik, the unique individual who has not just perfect outsides, impeccable behavior in thought, speech, and action, but also has perfect insides. There is no battle anymore with their animal soul. Their animal soul is either, bottle. It's a drop compared. It's overwhelmed by the light of the godly soul, and it's just not even fighting, or it's even coming along for the ride. Or some cases, very complete tzaddikim, righteous people. They are their animal soul actually becomes transformed to become like a second Yetzer Tov, a second godly soul. The Rasha is someone who has imperfect insides, right? They're not only godly awareness and emotions, they have animal, selfish, self-perpetuating emotions and intellect. And they also express it on the outsides. Then you have, and there's a whole spectrum of those that are, you have those that are more, what you would call it, those who are more, don't express their animal insides as much. They do it sometimes, not all the times. Whatever the case is, though, they could, and many times they do, falter, and the animal soul that is alive in the insides express itself in the thought, speech, and action on the outside. Chapter 12, we spoke about the Beinoni, how the Beinoni is like a Rasha, imperfect insides. When I say imperfect insides, I mean it has a godly soul and it has an animal soul. It just has, it doesn't have only holiness. It has a godly soul and animal soul. It's a healthy human being. But the Beinoni is a very motivated individual who has perfect outside behavior. And that tool, the tool of the Beinoni, how does he do it? How does he achieve where has a godly soul and an animal soul fighting to be selfish? The godly soul wants to be selfless, kind, mitzvahs. The animal soul wants to do selfish or self-serving things, or just tame or not, but just wants to do that. And it's fighting. How does the Beinoni manage to just not ever listen to the animal soul? And the answer is he has one tool. The tool is called the human ability. The brain controls the heart. That a human being has the special advantage. The mind can override the heart. So if you really would like a certain pleasure, but you know it's wrong, you have the ability to tell the heart, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So that's all right. I do want to take some questions. So please, either in your chat box or in the chat box or in the unmute yourself. I want to make sure everybody gets it. any clarifications, because if you appreciate that, you'll really appreciate chapters 16 and 17. Okay, we'll move on. So the next thing we got to know is a little bit of a quick review of last week, chapter 16, an extra tool. The brain rules the heart is a good tool to help us control animal soul and behavior, right? The fact that you can just say, no, I want to speak gossip or eat for, just hedonistic pleasure, or fantasize about something that's wrong. But the problem is, if our insides are constantly at odds with the right behaviors, it can be exhausting, like a rubber band always going in two directions. And it can be exhausting to always fight with yourself to do the right thing. Your insides, your animal soul is saying, no, don't be so selfish, don't do the mitzvah, think about yourself, you come first, whatever. And you have to shut that down every 5 minutes or hour or whatever it is. It can be very exhausting to always realize you have two voices or two drives, but always ignore one and be very and by the way, the animal soul is very crafty. The animal soul isn't always let's go to a Nathan's hot dog eating contest. No, let's learn Torah and pray. No, I want to just eat, I want to be the world champion of hot dogs. It's not always like that, course. Many times the animal soul can do very, very subtle things and say, I know it's time for prayer now, but, why don't you, before you pray, go study some Talmud, and or for, I don't know if it's a good example. How about instead of that, go instead, I know it's the prayer and there's a minyan now, and you can really go to your synagogue and pray undisturbed. You know what? Instead, pray in the daycare center and say goodbye to your 3-year-old so they can feel secure. I mean, everything you can imagine goes in both ways. But the point being is that everything, even a mitzvah, is not always the right thing every single time. There's a time for certain mitzvahs, and there's a time for other mitzvahs. You can say, well, I really want to do this mitzvah. How could it be wrong? Well, actually, the animal soul can tell you, go do a mitzvah when you should be doing another mitzvah or a more priority for that time. So you have to realize the animal soul is very, very crafty. It's very, it wants to just get you to do you. You do you. That's the main thing. Whether it's being a hot dog eating champion, or doing what you shouldn't be doing because you're doing some, nice act at the wrong time because you feel like it, that's also animal soul. So this is a very, very difficult predicament to be in. How do we deal with it? So we just said, always override it, but always override it is exhausting. So we're going to learn an extra tool in chapter 16 and 17. We did 16 last week, so I'm just going briefly through it. We say the brain rules the heart. There's an alternative meaning to that term. And it's also a second tool for the Beinoni. The same catchphrase is 2 tools for you to become the best you. And it means like this: the brain, meditation, can rule the heart, if not like a tzaddik who actually conquers his heart. King David said, Libi chalol b'kirbi, my heart is slain within me. My animal soul's urges he took care of it through fasting and prayer. That's not for everybody. But the brain meditating on the right things contemplation on Hashem, on purpose, on your purpose is as a soul to connect to Hashem, to reveal Hashem in this world, that can actually have not a total transformative effect on the soul, on the animal soul, but it can definitely tame it somewhat and even motivate it to do the right thing. So meditation equals focus. Meditation, we don't mean any meditation, we mean particular contemplation, focus on the relevance of God's, apostrophe, yes, it should be, expansiveness. Until, we said in chapter 16 last week, you develop tivunais, or intellectual, or also known as intellectual emotions. It's like this. The tzaddik, imagine your most passionate thought, your love for your family, or your passion for helping people through your career, things that you really connect to. The tzaddik has that love for God. Imagine your respect for something, for some expert in your field, or some very refined person, you respect and awe of them. How do they do it? Yeah. Did someone have a question? Okay, I guess not. So the tzaddik actually has that like physiological love and awe for godliness. That is not what we're expecting you through meditation or contemplation, how Hashem is real. And by the way, we'll talk later on in Tanya, exercises of how to actually meditate on God. And also the beginning of Maimonides, we just started the 3-year cycle of Maimonides Mishnah Torah. Well, in the beginning of Maimonides, it also talks about how to appreciate and become, it's a mitzvah to know God and contemplate God, because when you do that, you really will help all the other mitzvahs. So, but to what extent? A tzaddik thinks about God and gets enraptured, like loses himself. It says certain tzaddikim, they would think about, and they would go into a trance, or they would just forget where they are and just think about Hashem and become so happy from that, such abstract ideas. But for them, it was so real. So for us, that's unexpected. We have to just develop tivunais. Tivunais are intellectual motions that after meditating, and we'll talk about the meditation will be later, or you can ask questions at the end of today's class. And you come, after meditating, the conclusion would be, if God is real and relevant, and the only way for me to connect is by Torah mitzvahs, because God is infinite, only through God, as we said in chapter 4 and 5, God enwrapping himself inside the mitzvahs and the learning of Torah, is God accessible, because those are divine things, divine modes. Then I will use my whole being to act accordingly. So that's it. Then I will use my whole being to act accordingly. Now, you only need those intellectual emotions to actually overcome animal soul behavior and choose godly soul behavior. Now, that's pretty radical. And we talked in chapter 16 a little bit about it, that you don't have to think about Hashem to the point of like, oh, wow, I don't care about physical stuff. I really care about the spiritual. That's not expected. You have to think enough about Hashem that it's real enough to you, and that you realize that Torah mitzvahs is real enough to you, in order that is real enough to you that you feel, if that's the case, I really should try harder at doing Torah mitzvahs. I should perfect my behavior between my interpersonal relationships, or my prayer or my study, because that's how I connect to the real thing. I don't feel it. I don't have, my heart's not pumping, but I feel you think about it enough till it's like, that's the right thing. I really ought to do that. And when you have that thought, God, we said last week, will give you enough, will connect that thought, even though it's not like a physiological emotion, but it'll be enough to motivate your actions. Because love exists in you as it is. The question is just, for what? You have love, you have awe and respect, you have all these things. The question is, what's it going to be for? Well, if all you see is material things, that's what you focus on. I think the key word is focus on. Then that's going to utilize that faculty to love those things. But if you can spend time every day before prayer in the morning to meditate on Hashem, on how divine providence is real, how really God is the real reality, even if we sometimes don't see it, or we don't see it, but we know it to be true, and we think about logical, relevant ways that we can relate to, we'll say, you know what, that's real. Just because we're in a body, we have a mission in this physical world, it doesn't change the real reality. And when you have that, that intellectual motion is enough to fill up, we said, the right side of the heart, which isn't as passionate as the left side, where the animal soul is more in control, but it does have a receptacle for the motivation of the godly soul there. And when you focus on intellectual you focus on God and have intellectual emotions, then you can motivate the heart to do godly things, which is Torah mitzvahs. That's a lot of Tanya condensed into 30 minutes. All right. I'd like to take a moment before we I would like to take a moment before we go to chapter 17 to ask everybody, please, any questions on that? It'll just enrich the next part of the class. For those who didn't know, tonight's for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be starting at 7 o'clock. So I'm sorry, I put it in the email. I don't know if that was clear or not. But anyways, but you're in luck. We did a review till now anyways, up to chapter 17. All right. So back to our video, sharing screen. All right. If you remember the refresher on the title page of Tanya, it said as follows. The book, this is before chapter 1. This book is based upon the verse in Devarim. Rather, this thing is very, Moshe is talking to the Jews before he passes away. He's trying to motivate them. So in Devarim 30:14, rather, Moshe is saying, the Torah mitzvahs, don't become so, don't get overwhelmed. This thing, the Torah, the mitzvahs, to do it fully with every fiber of your being, it is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can fulfill it. And Tanya, the title page, the Alter Rebbe said, the Tanya is explaining clearly how it is exceedingly near in both a lengthy and a short way, with the aid of the Holy One, blessed be He. In other words, it is very doable for every Jew to be a Beinoni. Excuse the misspell. I mean, this verse is telling us that the Torah and mitzvahs, in your mouth, your speech, in your heart, your thoughts, so that you can fulfill it, your actions. It's totally near to you. It's doable. Every one of us can be a Beinoni. I would like to take a poll in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself. Do you agree with that statement? Or put it like this, simple question. How do you think it's doable, as the verse said, near, to always have holy thoughts, speech, and action in every situation? That's a Beinoni, right? You're always able to control your thought, to do the right speech, and to do the right actions, always, in every situation. How do you think it's saying this is for everybody, this is near. So Tanya, as we said, is coming to show us how it's near. So Tanya first explained to you the inner workings, the biology, so to speak, of the souls, of the mind, the anatomy of the mind and the souls and the different drives, and what how they're in conflict. Then it told us you could be a Beinoni, you can just always suppress. So one answer was, in chapter 12, it's doable because you can always do brain over heart. You can always override the heart. The heart, we're saying again, the natural human inclination towards physical things we love as humans. How can you always overcome that? Because the brain rules the heart. If you want to do the right thing, your mind tells your heart, do the right thing, then you can do it. So Deb says, for every Jew, it seems like a bit of a stretch. I'm not sure every Jew could do it. For the Jew with OCD, the tendency, it sounds like a stretch. Okay. Alan says, I don't think it's that simple. Yeah, I don't think it's that simple either. I don't think it's simple. I think the word is it's doable. You have the capacity, the inborn capacity for it, and not crazy. And by the way, let's not say every situation. Let's say in many situations. Maybe we always spoke about, is it all or nothing with Beinoni? It says no, you can work on becoming a partial Beinoni. You can be Beinoni in a certain area with these tools. Slowly but surely, you'll refine more and more of yourself. So this is where we said you could always override, but the problem we said is it's not that simple. Oh, so Schiffer said, simple but not easy, because perhaps in every situation, I think thought is definitely the hardest. Absolutely, thought is the hardest, because thought is the most, it's sort of like, it's a bridge, it's not as physical or behavioral as, the soul, we said, is made of intellect and emotions. The behaviors are outsides. That's action, speech, and even thought you allow yourself to dwell on is considered an activity, albeit a much more subtle activity. Yeah, I definitely think it's not easy. I absolutely. We spoke actually, if you remember, it's a good point. It's definitely not. It won't be easy. We spoke about a couple weeks ago the Beinoni who serves God and the one who doesn't serve Avodah. That's the Beinoni that's Oived Elikim, the one that's Shalei Avodah, the one that doesn't serve God. I made a big point that working hard is really what it's all about. So it's going to be a lot of hard work, but it seems to be very difficult. Oh, so you actually had a great question, Carol. What about during times that are highly emotional, weddings, funerals, accidents? First of all, you're not supposed to become like stoic and like cold and indifferent. As a matter of fact, halacha and Torah, it's very interesting. You read in Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, it talks about how there's actually speaks about how much grief one should show at the shiva, at the, what they used to do. I mean, not for every single person, but of course you're allowed to show grief by a funeral, or if you're in pain, you can scream, you can cry. There's parts of life that are less pleasant than others. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel things. It's more a matter of, should you be, put it like this, the Torah gives a way to be emotional, a healthy emotional person in all these situations. If you do that, that is an expression of God's will. And it's not always like, crazy. It's usually pretty, for the average person. But if a person would go against that for whatever reason, because of their own thing, we don't hold them like they're a bad person, but they wouldn't be considered facilitating or expressing God's will in that moment. Because there is a way to do it according to God's will that is appropriate and actually doable. So I hope that clarifies that, Carol. There's a way, as Malta the tailor asked the rabbi in Anatevka, Fiddle on the Roof, is there a blessing for a sewing machine? And he says, a blessing for everything. So we can take that concept and say there's a Jewish way to do everything. It's a Jewish way to, feel emotions as well in emotional times. Okay, so here's the answer. The answer is that this tool we talked about in chapter 16 and 17, the tevunais that are enough. Remember, brain now refers to not overriding the heart, but now we're saying contemplation about God daily, probably more than or as much as needed, to and learning the parts of the Torah that talk about God in a logical, relevant way, and seeing that in your own life. That brain activity, that meditation, will generate, you focus on it, it's going to focus, it will create tevunais. Tevunais, we said, are intellectual emotions. It might not have the same excitement as for ice cream or your favorite food in that way, but it will definitely give you an intellectual motivation, because the more you focus on something, that's what you create. If you remember in chapter 4, we compared the Chachma and Bina. There's 3 parts of intellect. Chachma is like the seminal thought, and then you have Bina is like the womb where it's developed, the building the idea up till it has a beginning and an end. And then we said Das is the union, just like a father and a mother, when they unite in a marital union, they create children. So too, when you focus your Chachma and your Bina together, you focus on an idea, that's a union. The focus is the union. And that creates children. The children are the emotions. In the case of the godly soul, because it's more abstract ideas, it might be intellectual emotions, but it's still emotions, it's still motivation. And that is what it's saying here in the verse. Rather, this thing is very close to you. It is in your mouth and your heart so that you can fulfill it. All you have to do is contemplate this tool, this godly meditation, do just enough or as much as needed to motivate you to go live a life of Torah and mitzvahs in this day, in that day the next day, whenever, however long you can keep that meditation to motivate you. As long as you meditate enough, you contemplate enough to motivate yourself to do the right thing, that is a special tool we have. That's another way we see the brain rules the heart. What you focus on your mind, on, that actually creates internal motivation. Maybe it doesn't make you stop enjoying pizza and just want to live the life of a sage in the synagogue. That's not what we're talking about. But to want to do the right thing, the meditation will help. It's near, it's doable when you, with this tool of meditation, it's doable. It's very near, not simple. Good point before Shifra. It's not easy, but it is doable. I think a better word for near is it's very attainable. It's work, but it's attainable. And all you're asked to do is do it enough to motivate a good day's work of mitzvahs in your life, of good interpersonal relationships, navigating your day. And Shifra mentioned, perhaps it's our life's mission, so we're constantly on a journey to try. Bingo. This is our life's mission. This is our life's mission. It's spelled very clearly in the Torah. Our mission in life is to try to live a life of connectedness to Hashem through studying His divine knowledge, studying about God, and practicing with every part of ourself, our thought, our speech, our action, our limbs, our homes. That is our mission, to make all parts of our life connected, imbued with that connection to the infinite. Oh, this is from another, oops, that's from an old slide. So, a few more interesting points. And it says, if you saw in chapter 17, who here read chapter 17? Or got a chance to review it?
I did.
Do you anything you noticed there? Any interesting language? Or anything that stuck out to you? Anything that stuck out to you there? No? Oh, yes? Deb, what stuck out to you? Would you like to unmute yourself, or?
Well, this is Carol. I
Okay.
read it, but I'd have to have it in front of me, and it's on my phone. I'm talking on my phone, and it's on Kindle, so so I can't recall right now.
Okay, no, so I'm going to put
Sorry.
that something. It says like this. This thing, which is, we said, I just showed you the verse. It's karov ma'od. It's very much within, it's very near, very attainable. It says, to anybody who has a brain in his or her head. Because you have a brain, and the brain can control what it chooses to think about. You could think about whatever you want, it says in the Tanya. You could think about, because we said before, you're going to get thoughts that pop up. Let's say a resentment, right? Someone wronged you. So it's going to pop up. And what's going to happen? You're going to say, oh man, I have to think about that and relish that and remind myself about that. And then you go through this like museum of pain and suffering, because you have to like relive the experience in your mind. Resentment is resentiment, like you're re-feeling the same experience because it popped into your mind. Once you dwell on it, you start feeling things. Again, what you focus on, you get more of. I think it's a popular ruminate. Very good, ruminate. So that is good question, Deb. I'll answer in a second. But for all of us, we have to know that we have this ability to choose what we feed our mind on. Maybe we won't always be successful, but we do have that power. And the more we realize the power, the sort of distracting ourselves from a negative thing or a petty thing to think about, and diverting it to something positive, helping someone else, learning something interesting, learning something Torah. That's what we're called on to do. We're not called on to stop feeling or start feeling. We're called on to focus on the right things. Now, this question that comes up is, did Alter Rebbe not believe in addictions? Should you just say, well, you have responsible thoughts and choices? It's a question that comes up a lot. I would have to say that the Alter Rebbe is talking to somebody who is healthy. If someone has a mental illness or an addiction, I don't believe that Tanya is going to help them get out of it. They need, it's the same way you go to a doctor if you break your arm, if you have a problem mentally in a certain way, or an addiction, it's a medical problem and you have to get treatment for it. The Alter Rebbe here, I think, is saying more that if you're a healthy person, even a healthy person can be petty. A healthy mind, a person doesn't suffer from those issues, still is facing a lot of challenge of selfish or selfless, of do the mitzvah or don't do the mitzvah, or do the the thing for myself. He's saying in there, these are the tools that you can always tell your heart, you might want something, but you know what? If it's not the right time or it's not the right thing, we're not going to do it. And this other tool that if you take time to contemplate about Hashem as you start your day, in general, before prayer is an opportune time, the morning prayer, then you're going to generate emotions, maybe not, fiery passion emotions, but at least moral emotions, intellectual emotions, to be motivated to do the moral thing of the day. And that's I thought that was very beautiful because, people think it's like it's one or the other. It's like either I like doing religion and mitzvahs or I don't. And we all know that it's not that simple. But here it points out is that you're not called upon to become some super saint or super righteous tzaddik. That's not what we're talking about. You're just meant to do the best you can with your abilities, your thought, your focusing, you're putting yourself in the right situation. Another idea in Judaism is that, you don't go to a place where you're going to be tempted. You don't hang around bad, it says in Pirkei Avot, if you have bad neighbors, woe to the wicked, woe to his neighbor. So a lot of times forecasting, what you need to be in a good atmosphere with a good, positive peers or whatnot is also part of doing mitzvahs. It's not like I do what I do and I just I just try to fight my inner self. No, you accept your human challenges and you try to set yourself up that you won't be tested as much. But when you are tested, you will have been fortressed with the motivation that we spoke about, both knowing that you can always tell yourself no, brain rules the heart. And tool number two, if you take the time to contemplate about Hashem and your purpose, your animal soul will actually be motivated to I want to do my purpose. Why would I want to but the animal soul is very short-sighted. It wants very immediate. Without that, it's very immediate gratification. When you use your mind to contemplate purpose and God and the realness of all that, then you can help the animal soul say, love, I love fulfilling the thing I was created for. You have to open up its perspective, take off its horse blinders. It does mention a point that if someone mentioned about the really bad Russia, the Russia who's to the point where he doesn't even have regret because he's been making so many bad choices. He's like deadened his sense of right and wrong. It's a very extreme case. That's like a punishment for all his, to the extent and magnitude of his sins. And the Torah doesn't talk about such a, extremely bad person. It says someone who's extremely wicked is called dead in a sense. The Torah is given to live people, to the spectrum of people that are trying to do the right thing, a little or a lot. So those tools are for the vast majority of people. It points out that even such a person, someone who really sinned, and all of us, by the way, even in our own smaller sins or smaller mistakes, we all suffer from that. This can apply as well. Teshuvah, returning to Hashem, does help. We talk later in Tanya the idea of Teshuvah, to return to yourself and to have remorse. That sort of is like a bit of a car wash to help you feel. You get rid of the greasy layer of our mistakes and our shortcomings. We peel away at that, then it's easier to feel, to generate emotions. Not everybody will have the same ease or difficulty in this contemplation. First, I have to know what to meditate about, even though I've given some general ideas. As a matter of fact, I want to show you, I'm going to bring it up on the screen. But meanwhile, please, you can ask some questions. We have 5 minutes left. I'll show you guys. Maimonides in the 13th century, he wrote this. And it's in the very first book. I'm trying to see where it is. Okay, I'm going to pull up the screen for this. Any questions before I move on to this sort of bonus, what to meditate upon?
One quick question. I guess that's kind of like what I was going to say. So the prayers are determined in the books and such, and the meditations are the things that we choose ourselves.
Right. Yeah, in general, we believe the prayers are written with very brilliant spiritual giants, the men of the Great Assembly, circa somewhere in the time of the Second Temple, beginning of the Second Temple era. There's a lot of Kabbalah, there's a lot of mystical things embedded there, so we don't mess around with the prayers. We try to really learn the prayers and connect to it. But even with that, it says back then that pious people would spend the time before the prayers, an hour before the prayers, an hour during the prayers, an hour after the prayers. What was the hour before and after? That was contemplation. So we see even people on a great spiritual level back then, you could just, arrive at the synagogue and just pray and expect to have this sort of mental experience. It took your own personal work. So yeah, it is particular. And it doesn't have to be, hours of meditation, just be learning something, well, and then trying to just think about one point of it that can carry you through the day's davening. Also learning the translation of the words in prayer is also good to help towards that. But this is, even with learning the translation of the prayers, we still would need a meditation period before. So I'm going to show you on the screen Maimonides, chapter 2 of the whole Maimonides. Okay. It is a mitzvah to love and fear this glory and awesome God. Fear meaning awe. Don't get fear. We don't mean as in like dread. It quotes the verses where it says it in the Shema. You shall love Hashem your God. It says elsewhere you shall fear your God. Okay. What is the path to attain love and fear of Hashem? When a person contemplates Hashem's wondrous and great deeds and creations, appreciates his infinite wisdom that surpasses all comparison, he will immediately love, praise, and glorify him, yearning with tremendous desire to know God's great name. As David stated, my soul thirsts for the Lord, for the living God. When he continues to reflect on these same matters, he'll immediately recoil in awe and fear, appreciating how he is a tiny, lowly, and dark creature, right? A speck of dust in the cosmos, standing with his flimsy, limited wisdom before he was of perfect knowledge. As David stated, when I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, I wonder what is man that you should recall him. Based on these concepts, Maimonides says, I will explain important principles regarding the deeds of the Master of the world, to provide a foothold for a person of understanding, to develop love of God. As sages said regarding love, in this manner you'll recognize he who spoke, and thus for the world to be. So he basically speaks about, the way in his time period, the understanding of how, what not the molecular breakdown, but their more limited periodic table of elements, and how intricate creation is, and how creation is a combination of matter and form. Matter being the physical stuff, matter of the creation. There's the spiritual. The form is more the purpose, the function, the idea behind the particular creation. He talks about the constellations, the orbits. He talks about angels, what are angels, what are the spiritual bridge between this physical world and God. If you want, I will post it. I just posted the link. If you want to read it, this is, of course, something that itself is expanded upon. That's pretty much it. All right. So we just finished chapter 17. And next week, we're going to start chapter 18. 8 through 25, give you a little foreshadowing. So right now, the Alter Rebbe, he diagnosed us, you're a human being with a godly soul and an animal soul. He gave you a couple tools. You can control the animal soul. That's an ability of the human being. Brain controls heart. We said, if that gets to be like a rubber band, then you can't always just force yourself. Start your day with contemplation, meditation about Hashem. Develop some love and awe of Hashem. And wonder, and then motivate yourself to live a life where you connect to this infinite creator, this infinite reality, the infinite. God's not like a creator, like God's somewhere up there with his magic, wand to create the world. God is just the inner reality of the world. So you want to connect to this real reality, the eternal realness of everything. How do you connect? Torah and mitzvahs, the bridges, the connections God gave us at Mount Sinai to connect to him. And you constantly, you get motivation, not only get motivation for the day, but you slowly the more you the more you think about something, you actually become more natural at it. We won't want, more shallow things as much. So there's one problem. And the last problem is, sometimes it's not so easy. You can't wait around to I'm not going to make a decision to contemplate for an hour, Many times you're not feeling like it, you're not motivated, you're not in the mood. You didn't contemplate that morning. What do? Was that it? You done? Your animal soul is going to win? No, there's another tool we're going to learn next week or the next few weeks, chapters 18 through 25, which is called the short way. What we just learned now about contemplation is called the long way. It's the long way how you really work on yourself. It takes time to build that line of thinking and motivation. But we need something right now. We want to do something right now. We want to do good. We don't want to wait till we feel like it or are motivated. We want to do the right thing even when we don't feel like it. And now we're going to learn, next week we're going to learn we're going to start the process of learning how we have in us to make the right choice even when it's hard, even in a very difficult, unmotivated situation. Have a wonderful week, everybody. And see you next week.
Thank you.
Be well.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Remember, next week, same time, 7 o'clock. Okay.
Same bat time, same bat channel.